Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. I'm Justin Nielsen, and I'm joined by Ed Carson while Alyssa is still on vacation. So we want to wish you a Merry Christmas Eve. And since we have the day off for tomorrow, for Christmas Day, we're going to be treating this as our Friday. It's essentially our Friday today. So we'll do that deep dive on the market and look at some of the details of what happened this week, look at the weekly charts, and kind of come up with our game plan for next week, the final week of the year of a very, very interesting year. So on today's show, we'll also take a look at a few stocks. This has kind of been chip week for us, and we'll take another look at another chip, Taiwan Semiconductor. We'll also take a look at Generac and Purple. So Ed, let's start diving in. This week was kind of a little bit of what the doctor ordered. Last week on the show, you and Alyssa were talking about the ideal action would be a little bit of a pause, and it seemed like that's what the market delivered for you.
Yeah, I mean that's what we've pretty much got here. The Nasdaq just sort of moved sideways. Let the 21-day catch up a little bit. Let the 50-day catch up a little bit. That's probably good news for a lot of reasons, and a lot of reasons. A lot of stocks setting up. I mean, we were talking before the show. You were talking about all these stocks that are finding support of their 21-day, or stocks that are forming 3 weeks tight patterns or forming handles, and these are all creating fodder for the next round of possible buying opportunities.
Yeah, and even though it was kind of sideways action, it's still making progress into new highs, which is good for your portfolio if you're still pretty invested in this market with a decent amount of exposure. So given where the Nasdaq Composite is, what do you think about the action in some of the other indexes, the S&P 500, and in particular the Russell 2000?
Well, the Russell has been taking off, and we can take a look at both of those in a little bit. The S&P, tested its 21-day. The Russell has been moving higher. Small caps finally coming back. It's really strong. We're at record highs essentially. We sort of had a pause, but the Nasdaq still rose for the week. A lot just generally positive action, I'd say, out there. It's sort of what you'd like to see. Take a little breather, but not really moving in retreat. I mean, that's sort of like ideal in that sense, because nobody wants to see losses. I mean, sometimes that can be healthy, but it's great if you can just move sideways for a while, consolidate your gains, and then maybe move on.
Well, and maybe flip over to the weekly on the Nasdaq Composite, and we can kind of see, you mentioned last week how strong that week looked, and we ended up with another blue candle this week. It kind of started on a rough note on Monday, but really recovered nicely and ended up kind of being an inside week a little bit.
Yeah, and you can see we've had a lot of positive weeks. We've closed near the highs of the
Not
week.
quite an inside week. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Yeah, it did poke above into new high territory a little bit.
Yeah, it did. And, just as you were saying on IBD Live, we now seem to be moving back sort of like to the middle of this regression line. We're not powering past it, but we're right in the middle. For a while there, we were sort of in the bottom half, and it just feels like we're getting more right up on that line. It'd just be interesting if we can keep following that, but anything close to that is still a really strong pace. This is a pretty steep advance.
Yes,
That we've had,
yeah,
even with this break.
And for a long time we've been saying, look, definitely at the beginning it was like an unsustainable level. The break kind of helped change the angle of this regression line a little bit, but it's still a very steep angle. And where one of the things we were talking about on IBD Live is whereas that solid line at the bottom, that solid green line is your one standard deviation away from that regression line. Your dashed line is your half standard deviation. And it seemed like we were spending more time closer to that, full standard deviation, kind of in that bottom part. And now it seems like the half standard deviation is containing a lot of the recent action for at least a month and a half here.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could flip on over to the S&P, just going on MarketSmith, just to give an idea of how that's been behaving. How did this action look to you this week?
Well, definitely Monday's action, we were on IBD Live and we noted, hey, look, the S&P 500 is below the 21-day moving average line because that's where it was at the time. But we also made the point, it's not about where it's at right now in the first hour. It's really about where it closes. And we saw a very strong close on that day, and it basically maintained itself in a good way. We did have some days in there where the S&P 500 was trying to take a leadership role. There was a little bit of sector rotation as some of the financial stocks were looking a little bit stronger. But overall, the S&P 500, I feel like it's holding its own, but it's really been the NASDAQ and the Russell that have
Yeah.
been the
But you can
leaders
see
of
this
the.
kind of action, like right here, we've sort of been moving sideways, and there's some up and downs. Not that it's been two gyrations, but just in that whole area.
Mhm.
And that's why we're finding a lot of those patterns.
But we
You
always do
even,
like that support of the 21-day moving average line,
oh,
no matter what
that's
the
right.
index is.
Yeah. And I just want to show the IWM, what's ETF for the Russell 2000, so you can get an idea. This one has really been, just been on a sort of a tear. I mean, and it had a long, long lagging of the S&P, but
Mhm.
it's really been leading, especially since the end of September. So
And you were kind of talking about how the election kind of shifted things. It reminds me a little bit of the 2016 election, where IWM, the Russell 2000, really came on strong after the 2016 presidential election, and that seems to be kind of what happened here. And part of that was, again, some of the financials getting stronger. There is a heavier weight in the Russell 2000 amongst those, but apparently a lot of people are comfortable with kind of the risk-on proposition that small caps provide, and yeah, it's been a very strong. I mean, this isn't being contained by its 10-day moving average line.
yeah,
It's not even threatening the 21-day moving
and a
average line at
steep
this point.
10-day is a
Yeah.
steep 10.
Yeah, so it is worth noting, kind of as you said, we're always a little cautious when things start looking too extended, but it just kind of goes to show, I think that there is quite a bit of breadth to this market right now.
That's right. All right.
So should we get into some stocks?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's go ahead and start with Generac Holdings. This is one that we've been talking a lot about on IBD Live. It joined Leaderboard. It also is a position on Swing Trader. So this is one that we've been kind of pointing out to a lot of folks. Had a very big run, earlier this year. Generators is their business, and at least here in California, a lot of people were very interested in generators. I know my sister, she kind of lives in the boonies a little bit, a very rural area, and they turn her power off every now and then when it gets windy and there's the possibility of fires being in her area in the forest, and so a lot of people are buying these generators to kind of protect themselves from power outages and what have you. But what do you think of this pattern here?
Well, it's pretty nice here. I mean, yeah, it came down, tested support around the 50-day line, 10-week line, and rebounded. Came back again. It closed just below the buy point. The market closed off highs, though we did finish relatively well.
Hmm.
But so that's okay. But we broke above, maybe say, and we rebounded above the 50-day line here. This was sort of an early entry. We actually made it stock of the day because it was doing this. I think you might have put it on Swing Trader
Right. Hmm.
that day, for similar reasons. And so I think it's even now it's still viable. Right now,
Yeah.
like on the, it's off of that.
Hmm. And kind of as you were talking about with the market, where sometimes a little pause is good. That's pretty much what you saw in Generac. You had
Yeah.
that very strong day, a couple days pause, really kind of maintaining the bulk of the gains from that strong day, and now it's ready to power forward ahead. So while this is kind of a mid-range close, it still was up. What, 2%, 2.7%. So that's not a bad percentage gain. Uh,
No, and the volume was pretty strong for a half day. I mean, it's going to end up looking
right.
weak when it all adds up, but it
Hmm.
was almost average volume in a half day. So pretty good action in that regard too.
Hmm. Another stock that we were talking about this morning was Purple, PRPL, and with a lot of people staying at home so much, they're looking at these home furnishings to kind of make their space look better. Um, uh, Actually, one of the things I noticed in the Q&A was a lot of people were having very positive comments uh, for their customer service, and people that have used the service were very positive on it. But this one, definitely cleared that buy point and stayed above it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really strong growth down here. I mean, it's interesting because it cleared this sort of trend line, then got buy point here. this one's been wider and looser than some of the other ones. I mean, just, we've been talking about tight action in the market, but this one had some wide and loose action, even fairly recently. This was looking not so great just a couple weeks ago, but this is why you sometimes wait till you see a decisive move, and it came back. So if you're still watching it, and it came through really nicely today. Again, the volume was pretty strong. It was average volume on a day when we're not going to have, you know, actually, I don't know if they showed volume. Well, it apparently had no volume. I think it did better than that on volume, but,
Mhm.
nice action here, relative strength line coming back up toward its record highs, which is pretty good action, especially as it's had a strong run this year.
Yeah, and given that this was something that was taking a pause for a good portion of November when the market was kind of powering higher, the fact that the relative strength line is as strong as it is pretty impressive. I mean, we always like to see a stock's relative strength line get into new high territory at the same time or even before the price does. But again, this was a little bit out of favor for a moment there while it was consolidating, and this still looks okay in terms of that relative strength. And as you mentioned, once it came through the 50-day moving average line, it just really didn't seem to look back. And let's go ahead and round out our discussion with TSM, Taiwan Semiconductor. We've been talking a lot about chips this week, a lot of setups. As you mentioned, the pause that we had in the market is always something that's good for creating opportunities. And that's why we don't shy away from corrections, even bear markets. We always try to look at it with an optimistic eye to the future because we know that, that's where the opportunities come from. If you can be sitting out or, kind of biding your time during those pauses and, keep your powder dry and be ready when the breakout comes. This is one that has had a number of pauses, tested the 50-day moving average line, and then it really powers ahead higher. So do you think this is set up for another potential run?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it sort of peaked above this. This is a 3 weeks tight. Actually, I'm going to go to a weekly chart, but it's like it sort of nudged about here. You could have taken a little early position or add on buy here. But you can look at this action, been really tight. Technically, it won't be a 4 weeks tight because it was up 1.52. It needs to be within 1.5%
Mm-hmm.
of the prior week's base. But it's essentially been trading tightly for the past several weeks, and moving above the high in that range is the buy zone for that. One question is, like, we've had a discussion about this on IBD Live. Chris Gessel, our chief content officer, he said, well, this is a little out of character because you can see it's tended to hug the 10-week line, or the 50-day line, but this year it's been getting a little bit more extended.
Mm-hmm.
I think the question is maybe things have changed, it's not clear because they seem to be the leader in technology, taking a clear lead ahead of Intel, which is somewhat of a rival in making chips for others. They're making chips, a lot of chips for Apple, and there's the chip cycle, there's the iPhone cycle. So maybe that really is different, and it can just be a little bit stronger than it has in the past. But it's certainly been acting well in 2020.
Yeah, and there's certainly, as you mentioned, the strength of their customers is a driving factor there. But and just so people kind of realize, with chips there is that cyclical nature to them. So you notice that there are those negative growth in earnings and sales from prior quarters, but then
Mhm.
they usually turn around, and when you have that moment of strength, that's where the chips can really do some, quite a bit of outperformance. And so you kind of have to take that knowledge of the cyclical nature and make sure that you're kind of putting that into the EPS rating, because the EPS rating can sometimes show, I mean, like the EPS growth rate is 8%. That's not a huge number, but it's fairly explainable, when you look at the cyclical nature of the stock.
Yeah.
So that'll do it in terms of stocks and the markets. Next week, okay, we have another short week. We've got another Friday where we're going to be closed for New Year's Day. It's the last week of the year. A lot of people are kind of talking about how they want to handle this last week. It's been a great year for a lot of us. Very strong gains. What are you looking at going into the end of the year?
I mean, traditionally it's a Santa Claus rally traditionally the Santa Claus rally technically starts on Christmas Eve and So we'll see. It's often can be a good week, but I think, you got to figure a lot of people might be saying, I'd like to hold on just for a little while longer into early January so you can delay the taxes.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, that you can only go so far, and that you might actually say, well, I'm sitting on a loss. You might, if you're thinking about reducing exposure, or if you have a stock that hasn't really gone anywhere, you could always do some profit taking that way. But generally, I mean, you're going to pay those taxes eventually, hopefully, and hopefully you want to be paying taxes because that means you've got some winning stocks.
right.
So don't make too much of it. You don't want to, I mean, don't want to go too crazy on that. I think that, you want to be just seeing how your stocks are doing. Most of them probably are held up pretty well. I think you want to be digging through the watch list because there was a lot of interesting stocks this week. Some of these were moving out, but a lot of them are moving at the 21-day lines, and a lot of interesting action going on.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest point is with so many things looking like they're setting up, you want to definitely be keeping your watch lists fresh. That's one of the things that we provide on IBD Live every day. We provide a kind of a fresh watch list. A lot of times the same names will appear there, but we're always adding anything that looks interesting, taking off things that maybe aren't looking as strong as they were. And so it's definitely a great starting point. But once you go through your watch list and start seeing where the setups are, what stocks are the strongest, look for new opportunities in some of these big leaders that have had these runs. See if they give you another opportunity to get in. And it might not happen next week, but the more you have these on your radar, the more you're able to do your homework, the more you're prepared for when they do finally make their move.
One thing about IBD Live, we talked about the importance of should you concentrate or diversify.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, we have talked about try to concentrate in leaders, but in my view, also you want to diversify in the certain sense, like not have all your stocks in software or all your stocks in
Right.
IPOs or whatever it is. Try to find leading stocks, but you want to try to find it around. So look at your portfolio, and as you're building your watch list, you're trying to look for things that are ranging around. And you might even have some real economy stocks too. I mean, some of those might do a lot better in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Deere is in a buy zone. Caterpillar just formed a 3 weeks tight after a nice run. I mean, there are stocks that, keep that in mind. Just make sure you're diversified between coronavirus, not coronavirus. So, you can't, so you capture, you can be in the gains, broad gains, and avoid big negative days, those days when a sector is really hit.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the problem with concentration. If you get too much concentration, then you've got that extra risk, whether it's a single stock risk or risk to a particular sector, and that can make it a little bit tougher to do the holding. So, well, that'll wrap it up for us for this week. We hope that everyone has a very Merry Christmas and a good holiday tomorrow with the day off. We will be right back here next week, starting on Monday with IBD Live in the morning. That starts 10 minutes before the market open. That's 6:20 Pacific time, 9:20 Eastern time, and then we usually go for a full hour plus as we analyze the market action in that first hour. And then, of course, we will also be back on Stock Market Today at the regular time, 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific time or 4 o'clock Eastern time for next week. Great. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you right back here next week.